Today, we're going to visit an island in Europe that has been described as being the most haunted island in the world. An island that only spans 17 acres, but where hundreds and thousands of people have been tortured, abused, and have died. An island where, because of its past, the government has enacted laws to completely ban anyone from even stepping a foot on the island. But before we get started, my name is Raphael. I am the True Crime Lawyer. On this channel, we unravel dark mysteries, explore true crime, and delve into the bizarre, the wacky, and the unexplained. If this piques your curiosity, I want you to summon the like button to the stand so I know that I have your full support. Please also press subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. And finally, I want to see how good of a lawyer you are. In every video, there is a random Easter egg that will appear momentarily on the screen. The first person who finds it and comments what it is and includes a timestamp will have their comment pinned to the top of the comment section below. So, are you ready? Court is now in session. Venice. The Italian city where every corner is a delightful surprise, and every canal sings a song of joy. Imagine a place where the streets are made of shimmering water, and the main mode of transport is a gondola, gently gliding under romantic bridges and between century-old buildings. Venice is like stepping into a vibrant painting, where the colours dance and the atmosphere buzzes with excitement. But among the inspiring architecture, the city hides a dark secret. The dark secret is called Poveglia. Poveglia is a tiny island located in the Venetian lagoon. What is striking about this island is that Poveglia is completely developed. There are buildings, there's a tower, and the island's borders have been completely fortified. So instead of there being sandy beaches that you would ordinarily see on a typical island, boundary walls have been installed so you can pretty much dock anywhere on the island with your boat. So the question lies, how is this a scary place? And why have so many called this island as being one of the most haunted places in the world? Well, for that, we need to delve into the history of Poveglia. And hopefully this will tell us why nobody dares to set foot on the island. Poveglia's history dates to ancient times when it was used by the Romans as a place to cultivate vineyards. In the Middle Ages, the island was finally inhabited by the masses, and it later became a prominent shipping port. However, that was the beginning of the end for this island. In 1379, Venice came under attack from the Genevan fleet. Subsequently, there was a mass evacuation, and all the people of Poveglia were moved to another island called Giudecca. As a result, the island was empty and devoid of all people. But all that changed when the bubonic plague came to Europe, in particular Venice, later in the 14th century. The bubonic plague is often been referred to as the Black Death. It is crippling, it is harrowing. It starts with pubis, or swelling of the lymph nodes, especially in the groin, armpit, and neck. These swellings become very tender, and they often ooze pus. Then you'll experience a high fever, often accompanied by chills, severe headaches, and then, in the most severe of cases, your extremities, such as your fingers, your toes, and your nose, can turn black and die due to tissue necrosis. This is how the disease came to be known as the Black Death. But out of all of this, what is most concerning about the bubonic plague is that it is highly, and I mean highly, contagious. This is the reason why the Black Death is known as the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history, resulting in the deaths of nearly 200 million people. For Venice, this was a big concern. During the 14th century, Venice was the epicenter of trade, and it brought in people from all parts of the globe. With that, it unintentionally drew people who were symptomatic of the bubonic plague. And that is where the island's dark history began. The Venetian government decided that Poveglia should be used to quarantine those with the bubonic plague. Anyone who showed even the slightest symptoms would be taken by force and housed on the island, and very few, if any, could ever leave. And for centuries, this continued, and that is what the island was used for and known for. Through the centuries, over 160,000 plague victims were housed on this island, despite the island only being 17 acres large. And what happened to those who died? Well, as I said, very few could ever leave the island. Almost on a weekly basis, the authorities would gather all the dead bodies and stack them on top of each other. And with a small strike of a match, they would burn the bodies and scatter the ashes on the island. Whilst it is hard to know the scientific accuracy of this particular claim, some say that, as a result, 50% of the soil composition of Poveglia is human remains. Now, I am very dubious about this claim, but regardless, over 160,000 people died on the island of Poveglia. Many of those would have been people taken away from their families, and they would have died alone, without their loved ones. Their death would not have been in peace. They would have been in agony, pain, and filled with anger. Whether you believe in spirits or not, you have to admit that under these circumstances surrounding these deaths, they would have had a severe mark on the island. But all of this is only one half of the dark history of Poveglia. When the bubonic plague subsided, the government was once again trying to figure out what to do with the island. It seems like they could never leave this island alone. In 1922, they finally had a plan. Now tell me, what could be worse than a secure quarantine facility for the physically ill? The answer is a secure quarantine facility for the mentally ill. And that is what they did. Like clockwork, the existing buildings on Poveglia Island were converted into an asylum for the insane. However, all those who knew of the island and of the asylum shared a terrifying secret. Poveglia Asylum was not a hospital to heal the sick. It was a hospital to torture and kill. Multiple sources of historical records state that the hospital was supervised by a man named Dr. Paolo. At the time, mental illness wasn't as clearly as defined as it is today. Hence, the hospital was home to many patients with physical disabilities, mental conditions, and neurological problems. The result was that anyone who behaved outside the cultural norms were deemed to be insane and forced to go to the island against their will. Poveglia became once again a place of nightmares. Inside the walls, Dr. Paolo performed barbaric and torturous treatments on his patients, such as electric shocks, lobotomies, and force feeding. The asylum's living conditions were dreadful and unsanitary. The staff neglected patients for days, and more often than not, they would leave patients in their rooms in complete darkness. Many patients would actually die during these periods, and their deaths would not even be noticed for days, if not weeks. Basically, if Dr. Paolo had no interest in performing experiments on a patient, that patient was left for uncared. And often these neglected patients were the ones who had only minor mental issues. For those Dr. Paolo deemed deserving of his care, well, they were the ones that the doctor would call his special patients, because they were the ones he saved for his darkest and wildest experiments. The treatments were simple. Within the dead of night, 5 nurses would forcibly strap a straitjacket onto the patient and drag them up the hospital's bell tower. There, Dr. Paolo would torture the patient until submission. Now, no one knows exactly what Dr. Paolo did. All that we know is that the screams from those being tortured could be heard across the island. As you could expect, there was a high death toll at Poveglia Asylum. And even in the afterlife, these innocent people could not find peace, as most, if not all, patients were buried in unmarked graves across the island. It is perhaps because of this, the dark spirits of the tortured souls who were forced to loom over the island for the rest of eternity were able to find revenge against the very man who took their final light and innocence. The story goes that sometime in the 1930s, Dr. Paolo began to suffer his own mental illness. He started suffering from auditory hallucinations. It started off with faint whispers coming from the shadows, These whispers then turned into shouts and screams. Very soon, he started seeing things in the corner of his eyes. It was clear to him that he was being pursued by the spirits of those he tortured and killed. He eventually completely lost his mind and climbed to the very top of the bell tower. The same tower, he ended the lives of all those he was tasked to save and heal. There he jumped to his death. There are, however, varying accounts of his death. Some say he may have actually been pushed either by an angry island spirit or perhaps by some of his living patients. There's also a recount that supposedly a nurse witnessed his fall, claiming that he initially survived, but then a ghostly mist overcame Dr. Paolo's body and choked him to death. In 1968, the asylum was finally closed, and the island was abandoned once again. And with that, the buildings were left to decay and fall apart. For many years since then, the island has become a hotspot for many paranormal investigators. Many of those who have visited the island to investigate it for paranormal occurrences have come back swearing that there is a dark force that takes hold as soon as one steps foot on the island. Visitors have claimed to hear disembodied voices, cries and screams, particularly at night. Some have even reported seeing shadowy figures or apparitions, particularly in the ruins of the hospital. There have been accounts of visitors experiencing sudden cold spots, feeling unseen hands touching them, or even being overwhelmed by this feeling of dread and despair. Now, it is very hard to verify whether any of this is true, and scientifically and rationally, there are probably reasonable explanations for all of this. But at the same time, I don't think it is surprising, and I certainly wouldn't chastise anyone for feeling uncomfortable walking onto an island where there has been so many traumatic experiences. Now, it is very hard to verify whether any of this is true. Scientifically, there are probably rational explanations for all of this. But at the same time, I don't think it is surprising, and I certainly wouldn't chastise anyone for feeling uncomfortable walking onto an island where such traumatic experiences have happened. Despite the history and the numerous tales of hauntings, the Italian government has consistently tried over the years to revive the island. During the global financial crisis in 2008, Italy, much like the rest of the world, suffered a huge downturn to its economy, and they were riddled with debt. In an effort to claw back on this debt, in 2014, the Italian government auctioned a 99-year lease of Poveglia Island. The idea was to allow the island to be developed into a luxury hotel or similar project, whilst providing funds for cultural and environmental plans to safeguard the island's cultural and historical significance. Luigi Bonaro, a businessman and later the mayor of Venice, won the auction with a bid of over 513,000 euros or around 550,000 US dollars. However, his plans for redevelopment were met with opposition, particularly from a group named Poveglia per Tutti, which translates in English to Poveglia for all. This group sought to challenge the lease and aimed to collect enough funds to convert the island into a public space where the island's historical significance could be preserved. And this challenge kind of worked. Due to public sentiment and because apparently Luigi Bonaro's redevelopment plan did not meet the standards for the terms of the lease, the Italian government decided to annul the auction results. As of 2023, there have been no further plans to redevelop the island, and it remains vacated and empty. Anyone who wishes to visit the island today have been warned that entry is strictly forbidden, with the Italian government publicly proclaiming that they will criminally prosecute anyone who dares to enter the island. Whilst this is a serious and legitimate threat, I think the hauntings of Poveglia Island are enough to stop anyone from even trying. So there you have it. What do you think? Would you ever visit Poveglia Island? I want to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you haven't already done so, summon the like button to the stand so I know that I have your full support. Please also press subscribe and turn on all notifications so you can be part of the exclusive club who gets to see my videos as soon as they are uploaded. Also, my videos are available as podcasts on all major streaming platforms, and I also do podcast exclusive stories, so make sure you check them out. Links down below. Finally, if you ever need to contact me, you can do so on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, under the username Raphael Parvin. I read all my DMs. So thank you so much for your time today, and I'll see you on the next case.